Welcome to Solar Oregon's How to Go Solar and Storage workshop. My name is Nicole and I'm a program manager at the nonprofit Solar Oregon. We've been delivering education on solar and storage since 1979 and have been doing this workshop for several years. We do update it as we get updates from the industry, such as with incentives. So we'll be covering those today. And we're here just to inform you so that you can make good informed decisions as you navigate looking at solar and storage for your home or business. Today, we're going to cover the basics of how solar works. We'll also look at factors that may impact your ability to go solar. We're going to review current incentives, and it's important to know with incentives, these do change. So if you see a workshop from a while ago, they may have different incentives. We're also going to cover the federal tax credit, which had some changes come into effect this year. We'll be looking at ways that you can find a reputable contractor and how you can get started. Just a few housekeeping notes. We're going to be using the Q&A function here to answer any questions that you may have. Feel free to put questions in the Q&A throughout the presentation. And after we present, we'll be doing that Q&A session to answer those questions that you've put in the Q&A box. We are going to be using the chat for helpful resources and links. So if you do put a question in the chat, we might miss it. So just remember to put that in the Q&A. I'm going to start with some of those links right now. So I'm going to put those in the chat. And these resources include a link to our website, how you can get a hold of us if you need to email us, as well as resources for looking at connecting with a contractor, or if you're looking at community solar, there's some resources for that as well. And before we jump right into it, we'd love to know more about you and your experience with solar. So we're going to run a couple of quick polls. Solar Oregon is a statewide organization. And we do these monthly workshops virtually so that folks all across the state can access them. We also do some in-person workshops across the state as well. And then we have some events that we have throughout the year, such as our Solar Winery Tour and our Go Zero Energy Homes Tour. And that Go Zero Tour is actually coming up next month. So if you're interested in that, check out our website and our Eventbrite, and you can learn more about getting tickets for that there. And then just a little bit more about Solar Oregon. We are a nonprofit that is statewide. We provide education like this workshop here about the basics of solar. We also do another workshop about comparing solar quotes, where we can help guide you through some of the key things to look for as you're looking at quotes. We always recommend that you get at least 3 quotes, and so that way you can really compare the different options available. We also help with different policy advocacy and do those 2 flagship events, the Solar Wine Tour and the Go Zero Tour, which helps raise knowledge and awareness about how solar is being used in our state by local businesses and homeowners. And then we also are at outreach events. So just this month in September, we're going to be at the Electrify event that's happening in Portland at the end of September. And then also there is a national event going on about solar called Sunday. And this event is happening all across the nation on Sunday, September 21st. And there's a few events popping up in our state in Portland, Eugene, and Corvallis. So if you're interested in solar, that's going to be a good place to connect and learn about local action around solar. Great. This workshop is supported by Energy Trust of Oregon. They're an independent nonprofit that provides resources to help enable customers of the investor-owned utilities in our state to use energy efficiently and gain access to renewable energy. They offer key incentives for solar installation, as well as for home battery storage, And so, yeah, if you'd like more information, you can scan that QR code or go to energytrust.org to learn more about them. They also offer some key incentives for solar and storage, as well as other energy efficiency incentives. We're going to focus on the solar and storage ones here in this presentation, but we do have a link so that you can check out their website if you want to learn more about the other incentives that we won't cover in this workshop. All right, so basics of solar. Here is a simple diagram of the system components in a typical solar system. To the left, you can see the solar panel, or photovoltaic, sometimes it's called, or PV panel. And then that is going to collect the sunlight and turn it into a special voltage of electricity, which is DC electricity or direct current electricity. But the appliances in your home actually use AC electricity. So you will need another component called an inverter or microinverter that will convert the DC to the AC electricity so that can be used by your home. Once that inverter does its job, the electricity will go to your electrical panel and can be accessed through your home and outlets and different appliances. When you get a solar system, you can do what is called a grid-tied system, which means you're still connected to the utility. There's also off-grid systems. This diagram here is showing a typical on-grid system. And when you do that, you will get a special utility meter that doesn't just measure the electricity that you access through the utility, it also is going to measure any extra electricity that you produce and then send out to the grid. So this grid-tied system here, you would get that upgraded meter so that you can measure the flow of electricity out from your home that your solar is producing, and also if you need to pull any from the grid. And for a grid-tied system, you would also get net metering when you get interconnected. So we're going to talk a little bit more about net metering later, but it's basically a special agreement for these grid-tied systems where you can get credit for the electricity that you export to the grid. And there's different types of net metering. It really depends on your utility. And so for PGE and Pacific Power, there is right now typical net metering. And like I said, we'll cover that later in this presentation. So that little component we talked about where the DC electricity can be converted to AC electricity that your appliances use in your home is that inverter or microinverter. The picture on the left is showing a string inverter, which that would be connected to all of your panels. And the image on the right is showing microinverters, and usually there are these are connected to 1 to 3 panels, depending on how the system is configured. And so both work here in our state. It's just going to depend on the design of your system and what the needs of your system are. When you go solar, you may need to upgrade your electrical panels. This is going to be a conversation that you'll have with your contractor when they're reviewing the specific needs that you're trying to meet with your solar system, as well as the specific aspects of your home, how much energy you consume. They'll be having a discussion with you on that. If you are planning to change your energy consumption at home, which, like, for example, if you're adding an EV, or a heat pump, you would want to let your installer know so that they can also factor that in as they're looking to design your system. Older homes might have an older electrical panel that needs to be upgraded. And then you also need to consider, what those consumptions needs are going to be in the future. You want to make sure that you right size your panel. I am not an electrician, but the solar installers have a lot of experience with this. And once they do an assessment with you, they can help let you know if that would need to be upgraded. Solar panels can be mounted either on your roof or as a ground mount. It's really common to see in metropolitan areas, roof-mounted solar. If you do have more land available, you might do a ground-mounted system. These can cost more due to the type of mounting that's required and conduit runs. So that is something to consider. If you do not have roof space or space to ground mount, you might have another building on property that could be right for solar. So just considering that is going to help you as you look at adding solar to your home or business. So as mentioned earlier, when your solar system is producing excess electricity, it gets exported to the grid where it can be utilized by other utility customers. And that is specifically for a grid tied system. If you're off grid, you're a closed system and you would not still be connected to the utility. So net metering is that process that allows you to account for the energy that you export so that you can gain credits for it. And these credits will show up on your utility bill. So they help you offset maybe when your system is producing less electricity and you might need to pull from the grid. And we're going to illustrate that with two graphs here. One is a typical summer month. So if you look at that graph on the left, when it's sunny, the weather is nice, you can produce more with your solar as you're getting more solar access. And when you're doing that, maybe your consumption is fluctuating a little bit, but because you can get more solar resource, depending on the system sizing and how it's designed, you can start banking some credits because you're producing more than you use at your site and you're exporting it to the grid if you have a grid tied system. So then you would get this net metering credit earned, and that's illustrated by the difference between that orange and blue bar here in that first graph. It's important to know for the larger utilities in our state, net metering year starts in April. So that really allows you to build up those credits when it's sunnier out and you can produce more with your solar. And then in the winter, you might be accessing less sunlight. So you might need to pull from the grid if you're grid tied in order to meet your consumption. So you would, if you need to draw from the grid, that bidirectional meter is measuring what you send out and what you pull from the grid. And on your bill, it'll show that. You know, what your, and we'll look at an example in the next slide. And so if you have built up credits in the summer months because you exported energy out to the grid, then you have net metering credits earned and you get a bank of those, which is also visible on your bill. And so when you do need to draw from the grid, you would use those credits first before you would get billable kilowatt hours. So we are going to look at that in this example bill. It'll show you your service period, your net consumption meter reading. So that's the energy that you use or electricity you use. And then as well as what you generate and send to the grid. So in this example here, this homeowner used less than they generated. So they had 327 kilowatt hours that get added to their credits. And you can see that as the year to banked excess generation. And so because they were able to produce more than they consumed, they don't have any billable kilowatt hours on this bill. Your solar system size is really going to come back to your consumption. So how much energy you use, what your energy needs are going to impact the design and sizing of your system. Also, the available space will impact what your system will look like. In Oregon, our average solar system size is about 8 kilowatts, and kilowatts is the unit that the system size is described in. You'll see it as abbreviated as kW. And then we'll talk about this when we get to batteries, but batteries, their unit is going to be kilowatts per hour or kWh. It's important to keep in mind that if you do not own the building that you're getting solar installed on, you would have to work with the owner. If you're part of an HOA or condo association, they might have regulations about how solar can be installed, but they cannot, HOAs and condo associations, based on certain policies in our state, cannot restrict you from going solar altogether. But they might have rules like it can't be on the street facing side. So if you do run into an issue like that, you feel free to reach out to us at our email. I'll just put all those links in the chat again so that they're fresh. Also, your contractor will have experience working with this, but that is something you want to consider. All right, so some other factors that might help you decide if your home is right for solar. One is going to be the amount of solar access or sunlight that you get. And that's going to depend on where your roof is orientated, if you have any shading. So if you have a lot of trees that are blocking out the sun, you might get too much shading on your roof to go solar on your roof, but you can consider if you have some more space and land, maybe doing a ground mounted system if that is getting more solar access, or if you have other buildings on property, seeing if those are meet the codes to install solar could be another option. If that's not an option for you, or if you're a renter, we do have community solar in our state. And so there's links in the chat. And with community solar, you would be subscribing to be part of a system that is offsite. So if you don't have a home, or if you don't have a suitable roof or area to install solar, this could be a way that you can still participate in solar. All right, another factor of your home that's really going to impact your ability to go solar is your roof. So firstly, the condition of your roof. If you have an older roof, it's important to keep in mind that solar panels have a lifespan about 20 to 25 years. And so if you were to install solar on an older roof, you would have to then uninstall it when you replace your roof. So really recommending they have at least 10 plus years of roof life. This is a standard most installers have because it is costly to uninstall that system and reinstall it. So really matching that roof life to the life of your panels is going to help you reduce incurring that extra cost. Your roof complexity, so if you have a really steep roof or a lot of different components coming out of your roof, dormers, chimneys, things like that, that can impact your ability to go solar or impact the cost of solar. Also, what's under your roof can also be a factor. So if you're an older house, you might just have rafters, and when a contractor looks at installing solar on your home, they're going to need access to your attic to check out that roof structure and make sure that it meets the code requirements. If you're in a newer home, you might have additional engineered trusses. Now that we talked about the basics of solar and some of those factors that can impact your ability to add solar to your home or business, we're also going to share more about home battery storage. As we think about resilience here with increased outages, that might be a motivation for some folks to get home battery storage, but if you are thinking about solar plus storage, it's really important to know how those components work together. Your solar system by itself does not allow you to use your solar electricity during a power outage. To do this, you would have to have that battery. And this ability to use power when the grid is down is called energy resilience. So solar and battery storage are complementary technologies. And there are incentives for both currently. So that's something you're just gonna wanna consider, and we'll dive deeper into that. Power outages can vary in their causes and frequencies. So when you're thinking about home battery storage from a resilience perspective, you wanna think about the types of outages you're getting at your home or business. Are they short, frequent? Are they longer? Um, and that's going to impact that design of the system. When you look at batteries, there are a lot of different batteries out on the market. Different installers may specialize with specific batteries. If you need a lot of instantaneous energy, that's also something that you're going to want to discuss with your contractor. And batteries do require space. They're often installed in the garage or on the side of the house. And they all have different modules and sizing. A common size is adding 1 to 2 batteries here in our state. And so that's going to be really important to think about what your usage is and what you are expecting that battery to do if you're thinking of it from an outage perspective. And then batteries are measured in kilowatt hours. So you'll see that when you're looking at different size batteries. They'll have the size and kWh as the unit. It's very important to set your expectations properly about what a battery can do and what it cannot do. So if you don't use much electricity, a single battery, even if you don't use a lot of electricity, a single battery will not back up an entire home for a long time. So many people opt to do a partial backup instead of a whole home backup. And a partial backup is going to be where certain circuits are chosen to be backed up and connected to that battery. And sometimes people do want to do a whole home backup, but that can be really expensive. When you get a partial home backup, the way you divide your home into sections that are backed up and sections that are not is based on the breakers in your electrical panel. When you've selected which circuits you'd like to receive battery power, your contractor will remove those breakers and install them in a second panel called a central loads panel. There are also some smart options on the market now where you can just replace your electrical panel with a smart panel and be able to have that load flexibility through that new smart panel. The battery system sizing entails that detailed conversation with a contractor. And you also want to balance 2 important questions, and that is what needs power and for how long. Items most frequently chosen to back up are oftentimes a refrigerator or lights in a common room or a couple of outlets so you can charge your laptops, phones, and other electronics. Now we're going to jump right into incentives. So there have been some big changes based on current bills that have come through this year. And one of those is that the Solar Investment Tax Credit, or ITC, is going to be ending at the end of this year. And so that is a federal tax credit that gives you 30% of your cost dollar for dollar as a tax credit of your solar and storage installation. And so with that ending at the end of this year, if you're installing on a home, that would need to be, your installation would need to be complete or by December 31st. And then if you are commercial or have a business, some of those timings are different depending on when you started your installation. But this is a big change. And so if you are interested in accessing this federal solar investment tax credit, or ITC, it is good to check, with your tax provider just to make sure that you're doing the right things to get it in before the deadlines that have been moved up. We are not tax professionals here. We are sharing this information because it's important for you to know about. But it is pretty simple, but only work with trusted tax professionals when you're working through your taxes. And if you have questions, there's a lot of misinformation online, such as that you can claim re-roofing costs if you're just putting in a regular asphalt roof or something before you install solar, and this tax credit does not cover re-roofing. So it is helpful to reach out to trusted tax professionals just to make sure you're doing it correct and also meeting those new moved up deadlines. There is also Energy Trust standard incentives here in our state if you're a PGE or Pacific Power customer. And so this just shows what those incentives are at currently. Incentives do change depending on funding availability, policy. So it's really important to keep in mind if you see something that works for you, an incentive that is going to help make solar work, that you look into moving quickly because they do change frequently, as we've seen with the federal solar investment tax credit. So this is what they are currently. These are standard incentives that come off the cost of your solar. You do have to work with an Energy Trust Trade Ally contractor to qualify for these and meet the system installation requirements. But it can really help with that out of pocket because it just comes off that cost, initial cost to install the solar. So it's a flat $700 or $800 depending on your utility. And then that's for solar. For storage, it is $300 or $350 per kilowatt hour, but they do have a maximum per household. So these are specifically homeowner incentives. Energy Trust does have some other programs if you're looking to install solar on your business or nonprofit. And so those are on their website. I'm just going to put those helpful links in the chat one more time while we're talking incentives. So if you want to look a little closer into those, you can check those out. The Energy Trust Trade Ally contractors are also aware of these incentives. And many of the installers do install on homes and also businesses. And then something else to keep in mind is that your utility might have a different incentive if you're not a PGE or Pacific Power customer. They might have a different net metering program. So if you're not part of PG or Pacific Power, checking with your utility to see what they currently offer for solar and storage is going to be helpful. Also working with contractors who are trade allies in your area. They'll be familiar with what those incentives are based on the utilities that are in the area. And then Energy Trust also offers an additional income qualified incentive. So there's just a quick snapshot of what your gross income maximum can be to qualify. You can also scan the QR code here or click on the links that we shared to learn more to see if you're eligible and can qualify for that. But that can increase your incentive to reduce those out-of-pocket costs for solar and storage. So costs can vary for solar and storage for many reasons. System and size designs are different depending on the needs of your home. It's a very modular, so not every solar system is going to look exactly the same. There's also different installers that offer different brands and system designs. So that's going to be a reason that that cost can fluctuate. Also, if you need to do any roofing or electrical upgrades before you install solar, that can impact your costs. Remember, we talked about the roof condition. If you have a very old roof and you need to replace that before you install solar, that's a cost that you're going to want to make sure that you keep in mind. And then if you install solar at a different time, so if you are going to do solar plus storage, and you install those at the same time, you're usually working with the same contractor and they can coordinate those elements to fit in the system design. If you are adding storage to an existing system or adding more solar to an existing system, and you have an older system, you might need to upgrade some components, or even with a newer system, you might need to rework how the components fit together. Your access to incentives also will impact your cost. So if you're able to access the Energy Trust incentives in the PGE or Pacific Power territory, that would impact your initial out of pocket. And then if you're able to qualify for the income qualified solar within reach program, which is Energy Trust's income qualified incentive. If you do qualify for solar within reach, that's also going to impact your access to incentives. And then we talked about the tax credit. The federal tax credit is ending for homeowners at the end of this year. So that doesn't impact your out-of-pocket costs, but when you file for your taxes, it decreases the taxes you owe. And so that was that 30% dollar for dollar tax credit. So that has been really impactful to many people to help with the cost of solar because then they can get that tax credit for it. So if that's something you're interested in, we're coming close to the end of the year here. Reaching out to contractors as soon as possible to get quotes is going to be really important. Quotes are free. You can look and see if the system design makes sense for you, um, just so that you are able to see if solar works for your home or small business while that tax credit is still available. Um, Also, interconnection, if you are a grid-tied system, so connected to the utility still, you would be interconnected, and there is an application for that process. And so that can impact your cost as well. We're going to show an example budget here, and it's really important to realize this is just an example, just with some basic assumptions of an 8 kilowatt size system. And then for the solar plus storage column, we're assuming one 13.5 kilowatt hour battery. This is not taking into account, working with different contractors, different site specifics that will be at your home or business. And because solar is so modular, this is just an estimate without knowing all those really site specific factors that are really going you're going to want those if you want to get a more accurate cost. And that's something that when you work with a contractor and they get you the quote, you can really delve into for your site specifics. But just high level, just making two assumptions about the average solar size. So that middle column, looking at an 8 kilowatt system, we're looking at about $32,000, and we already talked about why this cost can vary. Um, and then if you're able to access the Energy Trust standard incentive for solar for a PGE customer, we're also assuming a PGE customer here, then you would impact your out of pocket by reducing it $700 for that solar incentive. And then it shows you that total pocket in the middle row. And then uh, also at the bottom, it's taking into account that federal tax credit and what that would look like for 30% for that system. The last column is going to assume that you install that 8 kilowatt system plus one battery at 13.5 kilowatt hours. And so estimating $52,000. Your Energy Trust incentive, if you're a PGE customer that qualifies, would be $4,300. And so that shows how that impacts your out of pocket. And that's because you're getting that standard incentive for solar and storage. And then also factors in that tax credit. There are also those additional income qualified incentives through Energy Trust of Oregon, so solar within reach. And so you can check that out in the links to see if you qualify. And then just knowing that if you are adding your system in phases, sometimes that can increase the cost because you might need to reconfigure things. So these incentives are changing all the time. And so just keep that in mind. If you see an incentive that works well for you, you want to take advantage of it while it's available. Many people do finance their solar and storage systems. It's pretty common. Sometimes your bank or credit union might offer a loan tailored to solar. So since you already have a relationship with that bank or credit union, it's great to ask them first and see if they do have an option for solar and storage. And if they don't, or even if they do, also asking your installer and seeing what kind of financing partners they have. Um, this is a large purchase, so you want to make sure you're reviewing your financing options very carefully and making a decision that works for you, your home or business, and really thinking about things like what are the terms on the financing? Is there any penalties for payback? Looking at those common things that you would look like for any loan, for a car loan, for a home loan, anything like that. So, um, financing is common. Just make sure to review those financial terms very carefully so that you're making an informed decision. How do you get started if you're like, hey, this sounds interesting, or hey, I just really want to get a quote before the end of the year so I can see if it's possible for me to still access that tax credit? Which for the tax credit, you do have to have tax liabilities. So that means you have to owe taxes. So just keep that in mind as well. Um, to get started, we talked about connecting with those Energy Trust Trade Ally contractors. This is a program where they pre-vet contractors. They tend to be more local. They're approved to offer the Energy Trust Standard Incentive and Solar Within Reach incentives, which help that out-of-pocket cost for folks who are looking to add solar and storage. And then also they're familiar with the design and installation requirements. So we do recommend getting at least 3 quotes. If you are in Eastern Oregon or in a more rural part of our state, there may be less trade ally contractors that service that area. So just try to get at least 3 if you have less folks there. If you can now just at least get a couple so you can compare those quotes, that's really helpful. And if you do have questions, you feel free to email us. We also have that other workshop on comparing solar quotes. When you're ready to get those quotes from those trade ally contractors, you can use the Energy Trust Solar Bid Tool, and that link is in the links in the chat. And also, you can scan this QR code. It's a quick online form that just takes a few minutes to complete and asks you some key information about what you're looking to add. And then they usually try to connect you with um, a few quotes for those trade allies in your area. And then when you get those quotes, you review them. It's important to take a look at them and actually read through the quotes and make sure that you are making that informed decision for yourself. Once you do that, you find a quote that works for your home or business, you would go ahead and sign a contract. And then these are some of the next things that you would expect for the installation. That contractor, Trade Ally contractor, will help you complete the paperwork. They do not help with the tax credit, so you'd want to work with a tax professional there if you have questions about how to access the tax credit and how that process works. Permitting can take anywhere from 2 to 12 months. That number has come down, but there's also people who are looking to add solar here at the end of the year. So just knowing that permitting can take time. So if you are thinking about accessing that tax credit while it's available, you really want to move now to at least get the quotes and see if it's feasible for you before the end of the year. And then the installation is usually 1 to 4 days. If you have a more complex system with a lot of batteries, or maybe a more complex roof that's very steep and needs like a few different arrays instead of one continuous, you'll be on that longer side. But usually installation's pretty fast. And then your contractor will manage the inspections and interconnection. Once you're interconnected, you will be producing solar energy right there at your home or business. Um, Now that I just ran through that, we're going to get to the fun part, which is the questions. So feel free to put any questions in the Q&A. Um, and if you think of any other questions that come up, you can feel free to contact us. I'm just going to put the helpful resource links in the chat here. Um, and then also run the last poll to just see how we did with the presentation. This helps us so we can keep improving our presentation. This webinar will also be sent out to everybody who signed up for this workshop. And then we can also include those helpful links as well, if you didn't get a chance to grab those. And since there are quite a few helpful links there, so we'll just go ahead and include that into the email that goes out to everybody who registered. Let's see. Yeah, this is an interesting question. I think this is the first time I've got this one. Someone asked, if too many people on your street are exporting electricity back to the grid, PGE won't accept more. Is this true? And how common is it? That is a very interesting question. I haven't heard of people being rejected, but that just could be because we don't have a ton of solar in our state yet. Um, our grid system and our transmission, everything that's involved with utility grids here in our state, have to be maintained and updated. So sometimes an area that has that grid or transmission system there might not be updated enough to take all that excess electricity. And so, yeah, that's great. And let us know, if you are experiencing that, because that's good for us to hear if that's happening commonly. Okay. You have a question about how long does the whole process take? Is there really time before the end of the year? Yeah, that is a great question. So with that federal tax credit being moved up, people are trying to see if they can, get solar installed or at least get a quote before the end of the year. Some contractors might not have as much availability as others. Definitely reaching out to that specific installer, and asking them that question about timelines to make sure.